So we've all heard of the term love bombing, but have you heard of the term lust bombing? It's basically where the lustful chemistry between two people really becomes the focus of the relationship. And you might be surprised to hear that it doesn't just happen in new dating relationships. This can also be an ongoing issue in committed relationships and in marriage. So today I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do so that you can have a big picture view of your relationship and get some clarity without the influence of all the chemicals and all of the things that happen in you during that sexual connection, and hopefully help you identify if there's any patterns of lust bombing going on in your relationship, or even if it's a pattern for you in the past. For those who are new to my channel, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a relational recovery coach. So what I do is I help my clients get to the root cause of what's driving their unwanted behavior. And we do that on a subconscious level so that you can create actual change, not just change in your mind, not just learning something new, but something you can feel, something you can live out differently in your life so that you can create the life you want, the love you want, and really get rid of what's holding you back. So before I dive into this, I just want to mention that if this content resonates with you, I would greatly appreciate it if you would click like and subscribe. Hitting subscribe allows you to be notified every time I put out new content so you don't miss anything. And if you'd like to learn more about what I do and how to work with me, check out that link in the description below. You can set up a totally free complimentary consultation call so that we can find out if we're a good fit to work together, and you can ask all the questions that you have to ask. So you'll want to check that out. So when people connect sexually, they're oftentimes just using that experience to gain pleasure for themselves. It can be very self-focused, self-fulfilling, and not really externally focused. So real connection happens with deep intimacy, and it really has to have the component of emotional vulnerability and really sharing your emotional energy. So this isn't dumping every thought and feeling on the other person, but this is authentic connection where you are sharing the reality of who you are, what you think, how you feel. And you're doing it not just in the context of the sexual connection, but you're doing it outside of that. So lust bombing actually gets in the way of that because it can leave you feeling confused. It can feel a little bit like you're just so hyper-focused on this lustful connection, the chemistry part, that you're blind to the other aspects of someone. You aren't looking at the relationship with a big picture view in mind. So this happens a lot more easily if you are someone who has not reframed or integrated past complex trauma, the things that have happened to you in the past that have created some of the belief systems that you operate under. And so if that's the case, sometimes you're operating out of an old coping mechanism, and it can feel like maybe you have a harsh, critical inner voice inside of you. Maybe you have a lot of self-doubt, or you feel unsure of yourself. Maybe you have a lot of shame or self-hatred. Maybe you feel broken, like you just don't belong anywhere. Or maybe you're hyper-vigilant to other people's behaviors and their wants. This takes the focus, all of these things, off of what you really want and need and what you're feeling, because you aren't tuned into yourself. You're focused on the other person. And so when you're doing that, if the other person is really lust bombing you and there's just this sexual intensity, it's like you get blinders on, and this is your hyper focus, this feeling that feels really good, and that you're getting some kind of validation from the other person in regard to their desire for you, but it's based in lust and not necessarily their desire in knowing all the aspects of who you are. And let's be honest, desire matters in all relationships, whether they're new or whether you've been married for a decade. Desire is important, and it's a needed part of connection. And the thing is, it needs to be balanced out with getting to know who someone is in all areas of their life, or it can become damaging and it can become off balance in your focus. So getting to know someone, it takes time and it takes intentionality. And that's why this also applies to married couples, because there's a lot of times where life gets really busy and chaotic and crazy, and married couples are no longer being intentional about connecting because we aren't who we used to be. Let's say 5 or 10 years passes in a marriage. You have different feelings, thoughts, and opinions on things, and you may not be who you once were. You may have different curiosities in your mind, but if you aren't intentionally connecting with your partner, then you might make assumptions about each other that are based on something that's no longer true about you. And then this lust bombing can kind of be the focus of just connecting sexually, gets this hyper-focused attention in the relationship, and the other things aren't being addressed. The other thing that can really be a part of this lust bombing issue inside a marriage especially, but really in any relationship, is that it can be a bypass. It can be a bypass for dealing with the real issues, where you do this so you get this false sense of connection or this temporary sense of connection with your sexual connection, but you aren't actually talking about what's going on in the other areas of your life. So if you think about that in the context of makeup sex. So makeup sex could be great, right? But it isn't ideal if you aren't dealing with the issue that caused the fight in the first place. So it's like kicking the can down the road. You go from the real issue to this focus over here of connecting sexually, and then this issue over here never gets dealt with. It gets buried. You're kicking the can down the road because it's going to come back. You're going to catch up to that can, right? And it's going to resurface, and usually with more intensity and more issues around it, because the avoidance around solving it has created even a worse issue. So that can become a problem when we bypass actual connection and we replace it with the short-lived connection of sexual connection based in lust. What everyone really wants is they want something that has more depth than that. Something where connection is meaningful, so that the sexual connection is actually very meaningful as well, and even more enjoyable than if it's being used as some kind of bypass. So the best way to avoid this trap is to reframe your internal triggers. Reframe those old wounds, deal with them, bring them up, get help processing through them so you can function from a place of confident self-worth. And the reality about self-worth is that self-worth has a level of assertiveness to it. It is kind, it is patient, but it is also assertive. Meaning you know what's going on inside of you, you have clarity on that, and you're able and willing to communicate that to the other people in your life, regardless of whether or not they accept those parts of you or not. You understand where you are and you can respectfully communicate it. So the first step you can take, and the most effective thing you can do for long-term change, is that you can actually do deep subconscious work. Subconscious work that addresses the issues underneath the surface, helping you reconnect to who you really are. And really, this allows you to live in an assertive way so that you are able to communicate what's going on inside of you, and you're able to actually know. Because a lot of times we're divorced from ourselves and we aren't even tuned into our emotions and feelings and what they mean. So the most effective step you could take is hypnotherapy and doing that deep subconscious work. The second thing you can do is slow it down. Slowing down whatever relationship you're in, it really is taking those time outs when things get heated. If you're in a committed relationship already, it's processing what you're feeling and what's going on inside of you when an argument does come up, before you move to the sexual reconnection part that would be makeup sex, right? Because those chemicals can blind you. Gives you temporary blinders so that you don't look at the real issue and it doesn't get dealt with. So we want to slow down that process and make sure we're repairing before we move into the makeup sex part. The third thing you want to do is really check in with yourself. Does this other person genuinely demonstrate an interest or concern for you? You need to step back and look at the big picture when you're checking in with yourself. Checking in with yourself is being honest with yourself. What is the reality of this situation? Is there more depth than just this sexual focus or not. So it requires being proactive about asking questions and going deep, probably leading by being vulnerable yourself. And all of this helps you take an inventory of the truth about what's going on in your specific situation and internally inside yourself. Hypnotherapy is so profound in this way because our subconscious mind runs over 95% of everything we think, feel, and do. So when we reframe things on a subconscious level and we deal with them instead of letting them sort of run this tape in the background of our mind, we're finally able to create huge amounts of traction, big jumps that are actual changes in our life. So we quit repeating these patterns, getting sucked into things that are, lust bombing or love bombing or whatever. We don't get sucked into the fantasy of it because we have a sense of who we are, we're centered in ourselves, and we're regularly checking in with ourselves because we aren't being run by those underneath triggers and beliefs anymore. We've actually done the work to reframe them. So I want to just mention that being sucked into a dynamic like this oftentimes comes from a sense of urgency, and that can be part of a trauma response. When you have this sense of urgency to connect with someone, you discard your needs and focus in on the one thing that you're getting or you're able to get. And that is where you can get stuck in the lust bombing trap. So we really need to do that reality check. Again, I want to mention, if you'd like help navigating this, because let's face it, we don't heal in isolation. We heal together with the help of people who've gone there before us. So if you'd like to learn more or you'd like to set up that consultation call to work with me, check out that link in the description below. Lots of information there, even a free hypnosis download for you on my website. That's my free gift to you. And you can set up that consultation call, because the one thing you'll never regret is investing in yourself. And whatever path that is for you, I truly hope that that is the choice you make so that you can create a life that you love. Until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.